Good morning. This is Madeline Hare from the New York State Office of Children and Family Services, and we are so glad that you're here with us. I'm going to turn it over to our Commissioner of New York State Office of Children and Family Services, Commissioner Poole, to welcome us and get us started. Commissioner Poole?
Thank you. Good morning, Madeline. Good morning, everyone. And it is my pleasure on this sunny, beautiful Monday morning in upstate New York to welcome all of you to our 5th Anti-Trafficking Summit. This is the first time we've done this virtually, and I know that Madeline and Christine are breathing a sigh of relief that we've successfully launched. We always hold our breath a little bit, but I'm just delighted that we have and are welcoming about 300 participants across the state. So it's an amazing turnout for and a really incredibly important topic for all of us. And this is the first year where we are celebrating the inclusion of a safe harbor partner from every corner, every county in the state of New York. And that is a really important milestone that we really wanted to lift up and celebrate. So as you all know, this year our theme for the summit is Making Connections, Navigating Social Media Safely with our youth. And if there was ever a timely year for having this topic, it's this year, right? With so many of our youth attending school online in some form or fashion. And of course, because of the pandemic and other issues, right, there's not a lot of social activities going on. And so young people, and I have a 18-year-old at home as well, I see it myself, just really spending more time on the screens. And so this is especially timely for all of us. And again, I think that increased sense of isolation that so many of our young people are feeling now opens up even more opportunities, unfortunately, for them to be vulnerable and potentially victimized. So we are really excited and grateful to have the national experts joining us today, helping us learn and listen while we're carefully balancing our fears and concerns about the very dark and real realities of the exploitation of our young people with the fact that we know, right, social media and online presence is here to stay. And so how do we, as practitioners and with concerns about young people, really learn to do that well. So finally, I just want to welcome, I know we have some new partners joining us here today, and our community of partnership has grown just really tremendously. And I want to especially acknowledge Madeline, who's done a remarkable job for us here at OCFS and in partnership, right? None of us do anything alone. And especially not so these days, for sure. So Madeline, I want to thank you, and Christine and our partners from WRI, Darlene and her team, have really been with us every step of the way and have helped us do our Zoom summit today. So thank you all, and I hope it's a successful and informative summit. Congratulations.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you for joining us and for kicking us off. My name is Nina Alladort. I am the Deputy Commissioner of the Division of Youth Development and Partnerships for Success here at OCFS, and the Safe Harbor work falls under this division. We are very, very grateful that everybody is taking some time out of their busy schedules to get on yet another Zoom conversation, but feel that this is just going to be a critical conversation this week. It's interesting, Madeline and I were talking earlier last week about this is now the 3rd summit that we're aware of that has been focusing on the issues in cyberspace around trafficking, and we had started this conversation last year. Folks may be aware that there were a series of articles in the New York Times that really unpacked some of the issues that are happening around child exploitation, child sexual exploitation on the web. And they're worth reading if you haven't read them yet, but one of the astonishing and sobering facts that they lifted up was that about 10 years ago, I think there were or less than 10 years ago, about 300,000 images of children, sexual images of children on the web. There are now over 70 million. I'm just gonna pause for that to sink in. 70 million, and at this point, videos are outstripping photographs. So I will try to find the New York Times link and put it in the chat if I can find it later today. It's a sobering number for us to think about. And one of the things that is so complicated and devastating about online images is that the trauma, and I'm sure that we'll have specialists who know much more about this really highlight this, the trauma that the survivor and their families and loved ones experience is an ongoing experience. It is because it's not just that the act has happened, but now there is documentary evidence, and they know in their heads, even if they never see the evidence, again, that other people are looking at it. So this is really, it is a critical moment for us to lift up and really take a very hard look at how we can help our families, our youth, our children, our schools, our youth services sector, really help protect young people better and know how to respond when these situations arise. Recently, I was listening to a panel of young people talk about cyberbullying, and one of the things that a young woman said that was a fantastic reminder, and I have some 12-year-olds, and it made me really think about how am I making sure that I'm not taking things for granted. She said, you know, that although their generation is extremely tech savvy, it doesn't mean that they're savvy about how to protect themselves online. Yes, they can get everywhere on the web, whether we want them to or not, but how to respond when they get unwanted messages, how to report, what to report, how to get out of conversations, and that these are conversations that the adults in their lives must be having regularly, often, at developmentally appropriate levels throughout the life course of the young person, even well into young adulthood, because predators are having early and often conversations with young people online. So we're really hoping that this week folks have a chance to learn new information, make some new connections and networks, even though it's very difficult online, hear about some new ideas about how to inform your own staff, your young people, and how to really continue to make the web and apps safe and a supportive environment, while recognizing that just like in real life, right, there's risks that we want young people to take in real life, to go out and have normative experiences. We want young people to have normative experiences online, but we want them to be armed with the knowledge so that they can choose which risks they're taking and know what the risks hold for them. So thank you everybody for joining us. We're incredibly excited. We have a fantastic lineup, and I'm going to hand it over to Madeline to really set the stage for the next few days. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. And again, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. For those I haven't met yet, my name is Madeline Hare. I'm the Director of the Bureau of Health and Wellbeing here at OCFS. And that bureau covers the anti-trafficking work of our agency, as well as the runaway and homeless youth work. This event has been one of the highlights of my year for 5 years now, so I'm really thrilled to personally welcome you back, although the togetherness that I really appreciate about the event is a bit different this year. Just scrolling through the names of registrants this morning, you know, I was smiling just thinking about all the partners that have come into this work for quite a long time now, and we're just really thrilled that we're all here together. We, as our commissioners have said, the conversation around online safety and helping young people navigate these resources has been important to us for a long time, and we're thrilled that there are so many folks who really have expertise in this space who are willing to share that knowledge with us this week. And not just knowledge, but also really and approaches that we can make actionable steps moving forward, so that as you leave this event this week, you're able to go back to the young people you serve and help them to really stay safe and experience all those things that Nina was talking about. We want to make this an ongoing conversation, so this week is really almost a kickoff of the work. We're really excited to share that we have a new website, or a new page on our website, I should say, focusing on internet safety. It's live as of today. I hope you'll all go take a look. What we've done is we've pulled together a lot of the existing resources from folks that you'll hear from this week and others. We have pages for young people directly, for parents and caring adults, and also one connecting the conversation on social media and trafficking. So we will send that link out at the end with all the resources from this week, and we really look forward to your feedback, suggestions, other resources we may have missed. Please help us keep the conversation going by sharing that with us. So I'm going to stop here for this morning, but you will hear from me again on Friday. So at the end of our Friday morning session that starts at 10, I'll come back and speak with you all again to tie together the themes that we've covered this week and also talk about those action steps. So we really look forward to that. We have a great week planned for you. Thank you for being here, and thank you to Christine for doing so much to pull this event together. And you'll hear from her now about housekeeping, and we'll get going. So welcome and thank you.
Good morning, everyone. For those who have not had the pleasure of working with us yet, my name is Christine Anderson. As Madeline said, I am the Anti-Trafficking and Runaway and Homeless Youth Coordinator at OCFS in the Division of Youth Development and Partnerships for Success. In that role, I serve as the Program Manager for the Safe Harbor New York program. I am so thrilled to welcome you all here today. As Madeline said, we were so disappointed when we thought we might not be able to have Summit this year because of all that's going on in the world. But where there's a will, there's a way, and we racked our brains and came up with this idea of a virtual summit where we could all still be together and share ideas and learn from one another. And we are so excited you're joining us today. So thank you for committing your time to this unbelievably important cause. I do want to do a few housekeeping items real quick. As you know, Summit is a week-long event, 2 sessions daily, one at 10 a.m. and one at 1 p.m., except for Friday where there's only a morning session. The Zoom links for each session were sent over the weekend. If you didn't receive the Zoom link for the sessions that you registered for, please reach out to one of us and we will get it to you as soon as possible. If you encounter IT issues at any point with the presentation, you can send an email to info@welfareresearch.org. It's at the bottom of this screen right now, and we will get help sent your way very quickly. If you have an IT issue during the presentation, you can type that issue in the chat box and somebody will do everything they can to help you. All presentations are being recorded and they will be posted in HSLC for future viewings. If you need a certificate for participation, we will issue that per request. So just send me an email. My name is Christine Anderson, and we will get that to you as soon as possible. Next week, we will send out a post-summit survey. Please use this opportunity to provide feedback for us about the event, and we can incorporate that into any future sessions, although we hope to be with you again in the future in person. Lastly, and possibly most importantly, participants are automatically muted during the presentation. Each presenter has about 45 minutes of content to present, including some kind of interaction. And then we will reserve about 15 minutes for about Q&A. If you could hold questions till the end, then they will go into the Q&A box on the screen, and the presenter will get to as many questions as possible. If we do not get to answer your question during the presentation, we do have the ability to see the questions after, and we will get to an answer to your question. That wraps up housekeeping. I want to take a minute to introduce this morning's presenter. We are thrilled to have him. It is my great pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker for Summit, Rob Spector from ChildSafe AI. ChildSafe AI is the world's first artificial intelligence platform for monitoring, graphing, and modeling child exploitation online. We are thrilled Rob was able to join us today to speak to their research and help us understand the lay of the land of the online sex economy, including the digital exploitation and trafficking of young people. Not only will he help us understand the scope and breadth of the issue, but his research also highlights the changes to that landscape that were caused by COVID-19. He'll mention this, I'm sure, but you may hear the term sex worker or sex work throughout. This is reflective of the language used in online forums and identified by ChildSafe's research. It in no way condones the commercial sexual exploitation of minors, nor does it diminish the reality that children who are exploited online are victims and survivors of crimes. With that said, it is my pleasure to turn it over to Rob.
And I was the first person to have a mute fail at the beginning of this whole thing. We went through the whole morning without a mute fail on Zoom, and I'm the one who messed it up. The tech guy is the one who messed it up. That's terrible. Christine, thank you very much for having me this morning. Wow, what an inspiring group assembled for a week of fellowship that has been put together by OCFS. Obviously, I want to thank Commissioner Poole and Deputy Commissioner Alador for having me out. The one thing I will say is putting together, having some experience with event production, putting together a virtual summit is about twice as hard as putting together a physical summit. So would like to extend my congratulations to Christine and Madeline for getting this one shipped. It's going to be a really fun week, and I'm delighted to join you all. We're going to be talking a little bit today about the impact of COVID-19 on the online underground commercial sex economy, and to set the stage a bit for what our perspective is in this economy and how it affects human trafficking, not just in the United States, but indeed right here in New York. I'd like to share a little bit about the company. We are an artificial intelligence startup in New York, and our mission is to protect kids online. And the way that we do that is we use the worst parts of the internet to protect the best parts of the internet. If you think about the internet as being a collection of thousands of services that are used by millions of kids online, you can imagine there are hundreds of thousands of predators that are trying to tug on the threads of vulnerability of those children for the purposes of sexual exploitation. Our software goes to the worst parts of the internet, the places where children are recruited, groomed, bought, and sold online. And we monitor the activity of these predators. We use that activity to create networks and patterns of predation, and then use that to feed that into classifiers and other machine learning tools that help us identify when those patterns of predation intersect with children online. As a consequence of this work, I feel we have a useful perspective into the online communities where this stuff is taking place. For the purposes of today's talk, over the course of the next 40 minutes, we're going to be focused on the online marketplaces where children are bought and sold for sex online. First, a quick disclaimer. This one's for the lawyers. Any of the opinions or analysis expressed herein are the sole property of ChildSafe AI and myself, and are not reflective of our law enforcement partners. As Christine mentioned earlier, we are going to be covering some heavy stuff, so forewarned is forearmed. Further, the language in a lot of this content, we've tried to scrub for any graphic language. There's a lot of content here. There's a lot of screenshots and a lot of text overall. If we missed anything, I hope you will forbear us. And obviously, a lot of the language that is being used in these posts are reflective of the market actors themselves. And certainly not an endorsement from us of the worldview that they represent. So with all those caveats in mind, let's talk a little bit about the global pandemic, the gigantic elephant in 2020 that's affecting nearly every part of our life, and investigate a bit together what the past 8 months have meant for these online ecosystems for commercial sex, and that serve as the distribution layer for human trafficking in the United States. So COVID-19, 2 sigma downturn event in economist terms. This is a capital B, capital D, big deal. 5 years of gross domestic product evaporated in the space of a single quarter, and as a consequence, commodities got creamed. The reason why these macroeconomic effects are so important for consideration for the underground commercial sex economy is because the buyers and the distributors in the commercial sex economy, that is to say the Johns and the Pimps in the commercial sex economy, view the supply, the providers of commercial sex, as a fungible commodity. This buyer on the Erotic Review goes so far as to compare the escort business like gas and oil, indicating that guys visiting escorts have dropped off a cliff because of the coronavirus. Another one indicates that the supply has dropped off as well. These two parts of the economy view the supply as a commodity. And when you consider this as an illicit economy, you can see that it is uniquely vulnerable to the global pandemic in three key ways. The first way is that it's based on a services model. Obviously, both parties need to be physically present in order to transact, and there are significant hurdles that are impeding those transactions today. The biggest one is the school closings, as we will see in a lot of the qualitative data that we are going to present here in a bit. But business travel and a number of other factors are also inhibiting the ability for both the supply and the demand to connect physically in space. The second factor is the reliance of this economy on discretionary income. St. Louis Fed back in March indicated that the unemployment rate may hit as high as 32%. For reference, during the Great Depression, the height of unemployment was only 29%. If we are in a national reality where 1 out of 3 Americans are out of work, you can imagine every discretionary dollar is going to be carefully evaluated in every household in the United States. And something like commercial sex could be viewed as an unnecessary extravagance. That appears to be the case already today in October, as we will discover in the qualitative data. The last factor, and this one is probably familiar to a lot of folks on this call, given you're all steeped professionals in this space. It's not like this economy was going gangbusters heading into the pandemic in March. Since the twin events in April 2018 that have fragmented the online distribution layer for commercial sex in the United States, the subsequent competing websites have a much lower signal to noise ratio, and that has caused demand to steadily decline over the course of the past 2 years. The analogy that I draw to this is similar to a company like Boeing. When the foundations of the economy are not strong going into a macro econ event, it causes the bottom to drop out and a significant decline in activity, which we are going to see soon. For folks that are not steeped in the online distribution layer for commercial sex in the United States, we'll set up some quick definitions of the 3 product categories that we look at childsafe.ai when we're trying to analyze this illicit economy. The first one is one that you're likely already familiar with. These are sites that look and feel like Backpage. They're classified advertising sites. And the way that they monetize is a provider of commercial sex posts an ad for a particular geography for a particular period of time. These advertising costs can be anywhere from $5 to $500 a month. And they include sites like Adult Search, BedPage, CityX Guide before it got seized by the feds, Mega Personals, Skip the Games, Eros. These are all examples of advertising websites, and they all have varying degrees of quality, of design, and signal to noise in their advertising inventory, but they all operate on basically the same model. And this is when people think of the underground commercial sex economy online, they usually think of these types of websites first. They are supplemented on the demand side by hobby boards or review boards. These basically function like a Yelp for human beings. These are buyer-owned and buyer-operated social networks whose atomic unit of content is not a classified advertising post by a provider, but instead a review of commercial sex by a buyer. So this is monetized through a premium subscription model. I, as a buyer, can pay anywhere between $10 to $30 per month to gain access to more information about providers of commercial sex in my local area. The third category, the fastest growing category, is sugaring sites or sugar daddy websites, the most popular of which is Seeking Arrangement in the United States. These websites operate more like a traditional dating site, like an OkCupid or an eHarmony. The demand side of the economy pays per contact to reach the supply side of the economy. And these 3 types of websites are what we're going to be looking at in this analysis. So with that baseline of understanding and glossary established, let's take a look at some signals. Let's see what's happening with these websites with respect to the spread of COVID-19 in the United States. Search traffic on Google for escorts, which is the most popular phrase for commercial sex in the United States, has been going up and down. There was obviously a significant decline. Peak to trough, it was a 25% drop in United States search traffic for commercial sex in the United States. As we started to enter the summer and cases started to go down, that search traffic started to rebound, but then started to decline again as we experienced the second surge starting in July. The websites themselves have undergone some pretty significant swings. The sugaring websites have been doing better than the advertising or hobby board websites. Sugaring websites are almost back to the level of traffic that they experienced beforehand. However, the advertising sites and the hobby boards in particular are struggling to make a similar rebound, with the hobby boards experiencing the most significant decline and sustained decline out of the three product categories online so far. Taking a look at reviews, the most popular hobby board in the country is a site called The Erotic Review. We take a look at how many reviews are posted on that site over time. And we feel this is a really good indicator of actual transaction activity. It's a heavily moderated form. A review actually constitutes a transaction for commercial sex. And those reviews are down 71% and still have not rebounded since their height over the winter and going into the spring. Melissa Dries, we will provide some list of words, a glossary for you with respect to these three websites towards the end. Thanks for asking that question. On our own platform, we have the largest counter demand platform in the country. We're in 10 cities around the country. We have seen a significant decline in the response rates for decoy commercial sex advertising in these marketplaces. The number of buyers that are responding to ads that our law enforcement partners post has dropped 78%. Saw some of an increase as we went into the summer, but have seen a significant decline ever since. This has been inconsistent from city to city. Obviously, New York City, where we are based, had a significant outbreak in March and April. We saw the response rates start to increase as that outbreak started to subside. Other markets like Chicago, which have continued to slowly but steadily increase with their cases over time, have not yet recovered. Now, I will say most of our data for response rates to decoy advertising are located in major markets and other counter-demand organizations in the country that are doing good work, like the EPIC Project in Street Grace, that focus mainly on mid-market and minor markets in the Midwest and the South, have not seen this kind of activity. Most of their numbers in terms of decoy advertising response rates are either flat or slightly increasing. And our sense is that this is attributable to the difference in the pandemic spread across the rest of the country. As you all know, the Northeast exhibited the highest peak at the beginning of the pandemic, but has gradually gotten its outbreak under control, whereas the Midwest, the South, and the West continue to struggle to this day. And this is very evident when you take a look at the search traffic for a particular geography and the outbreak of COVID-19 in a particular area. For example, you take a look at New York. This is the search traffic on Google for commercial sex. And you can see a obvious inverse correlation between the number of COVID cases and the number of searches. As the number of COVID cases go up, the number of searches go down. As the COVID cases come down, the activity around search for commercial sex starts to increase. However, this is not true across every geography in the United States. If you take a look at a state like Florida, which had a significant outbreak over the course of the summer, you can see that their search traffic seemed to be modeling the national headlines as opposed to local reality. Even though they did not have a significant COVID outbreak going into the spring, they had a significant drop in the amount of search traffic that was taking place. And even as their COVID cases started to grow, the web search traffic for commercial sex continued to rebound despite the local reality of the virus happening in that area at that particular time. What does this all mean? I think from this signal, we can assume that the impact for COVID-19 for commercial sex is highly fragmented in the different geographies, in the same way that the pandemic has spread to different communities in different ways across the United States. Its effect on the commercial sex economy has been similarly varied. Taking a turn, let's take a look at some qualitative data. Let's see what the buyers around the United States are saying about COVID-19 with respect to its spread in the country. Is your work quick question from Alia Howard. Is your work looking at all commercial sex, or is this data specifically re-CSEC youth? This particular presentation is looking at commercial sex specifically. There's a different analysis that we have for CSEC and CSAM, but this is looking for the buying and selling. And we'll try to slow down a little bit to take a little time here. Sorry, had a lot of coffee. It's Monday, and we're coming out of the gates hot, but we'll try to reel it back in as we talk a little bit about the effect on the buyers. The buyers first heard about the direct connection between the commercial sex economy and COVID-19 spread with an article in the Huffington Post that described its effect in Seattle, indicating that providers of commercial sex were losing clients and taking more risks back in March. This elicited a national conversation inside these buyer communities about COVID's effect on their sex buying behavior. Some buyers indicated that they were going to suspend their buying activity until the pandemic subsided. Other buyers indicated that they don't remember other outbreaks like SARS or MERS or swine flu or Ebola having as significant an impact on their sex buying behavior as they have seen with the coronavirus. And other buyers were initially dismissive, indicating that they were going to take a risk regardless of what was going on with the pandemic. However, as the severity of the pandemic started to increase, as the headlines out of New York started becoming more grim, and particularly as the schools and the professional sports started to close, there was a change in the timbre of the conversation that buyers were having around this. A lot of buyers were indicating that it was difficult to be casual and disappear from the house for hours at a time when there was a lockdown order. Other buyers started to indicate that there were a significantly less number of providers that were selling sex online. And other ones were openly derisive about buyers that were engaging in this activity as we started to go into April. Folks operating on the distribution layer, that is to say, operators of brothels and escort agencies, also started to observe around this time that the buyers that did remain, the buyers that were buying during this period, tended to be high frequency buyers. This operator of a brothel in northern New Jersey indicates, I haven't seen one guy that hobbies very often say that they aren't hobbying now. And that appears to be reflective in a lot of the data for the buyers that we see coming into our platform as well. The Sex Worker Outreach Project in Brooklyn indicated that there was a significant drop in demand, and a self-identified sex worker in that article also indicated that there was a rise in predatory behavior. Clients who are pushing unsafe practices like non-barrier contact for a fraction of our advertised rates. These buyers are starting to come out of the woodwork. As we start to go into April, you start to see more of the on-site locations, physical locations like illicit massage businesses or escort agencies that run in-call spots starting to shutter. This high-frequency buyer indicates that 2 of the 3 biggest agencies in Orange County closed for 2 weeks, and most of the IMBs were closed. We also starting to see more indications of physical and sexual violence on self-identified sex worker forums on Reddit and on Twitter. As we start to go into the summer, into May, buyers start to observe that there's significantly less advertising volume than that they've seen in previous years. And they also indicate that the extended work from home, the extended lockdown, and particularly having the kids at home is keeping them from being able to ultimately transact. As we go into the summer, the buyers start to observe that the activity in these buyer forums on these hobby boards starts to decline. And they also start to indicate that the prices for commercial sex are starting to rise. And we're seeing this in nearly every market around the country, with this buyer indicating that the prices in his market in Portland have gone up 33% since the start of the pandemic. Buyers continue to indicate that the risk is high. They're also indicating that they're saving a lot of money by not transacting, and that the financial aspect of the pandemic is driving or motivating the cessation of their buying activity. And as we go into the summer, we're seeing more pervasive indications that rates are going up. So the natural question is, like, what does this mean for sex buying in the United States? What is going to ultimately happen? I think there are a lot of people that are trying to model what the economic recovery is going to look like. Is it going to be a V shape? Is it going to be an L shape? Is it going to be a K shape, a W shape? I'll leave it to the folks at McKinsey to make those determinations. But I think now that we're in October, now that we've seen this activity persist for a number of months, there are three conclusions we can draw about what the effect is going to be for sex buying in the United States. The first bit is the demand for commercial sex in the United States is at a lifetime low. Even if we had the ability to wave a magic wand tomorrow and eliminate the coronavirus in its entirety from the United States, enough months have passed that 2020 will have the least amount of wealth flowing into the commercial sex economy, and as a subset of that, flowing into the human trafficking economy in the United States. Those buyers that are transacting do represent higher value than buyers that we had in January. The buyers that are buying today represent a greater contribution to the overall economy because they are more likely to be high frequency buyers. They also represent apparently more risk for providers of commercial sex with respect to physical and sexual violence. Finally, in terms of recovery, I think it's safe to say at this point that demand for commercial sex will lag the market as a whole. The biggest gates to this are going to be commercial travel and business travel, also school reopening and closing. Until schools are fully open all day, I think we can continue to expect that the demand for commercial sex will be lower than it was at the beginning of January. Turning our attention now to the supply, we have about 15 minutes left to go, and then we'll go ahead and open it to y'all's questions. Looking at the supply, that is to say providers of commercial sex, they're also indicating that there's been a significant drop in demand. This quotation from the Lilly indicates, as far as in-person labor is concerned, our work has been totally decimated. Talked about the Sex Worker Outreach Project, indicating that the source of income has been effectively evacuated. Taking a look at some self-identified sex worker forums like Reddit, we can see providers of commercial sex indicating that the client list that they had previously was cut in half. This is in March. This is true for folks that are performing in-call and out-call. These self-identified brothel workers are indicating that the drop in income has been so significant that they're operating on an eighth of their previous income. And especially in communities that were hard hit early on, like New York, many of these providers of commercial sex are indicating that their income has dropped to actual zero. We also starting to see an indication in advertising that the number of no-call, no-shows are starting to rise. The number of regular customers are also starting to dwindle unless they're healthcare workers that likely were already previously exposed to coronavirus. And we also see in the advertising that some providers of commercial sex are indicating coronavirus-free in their ads. This is particularly true for illicit massage businesses. You'll see no coronavirus, healthy 100%, temperature checks, other indications of pandemic precaution in the advertising itself. We also see that reflected in some of the fetish posts, both in the text and in the imagery that's present. We're also seeing reports that a lot of these in-call locations are requiring buyers to transact with a mask. There are some attempts at mutual aid inside this community, but they appear to be spotty, and they also don't appear to be for high dollar amounts. They're, at best, some time for some food, for a soup or a sandwich, maybe a couple $100s. But as a whole, the mutual aid that's self-organizing in this community is not remotely close to the lack of income. And as we started to go into April and May, the panic level inside this community clearly started to increase, with folks indicating that they are freaking out. And if you are a provider of commercial sex in a major city, your income is likely going to be significantly reduced for not just the short term, but for the intermediate term. As a consequence, a lot of these communities have indicated that they are trying to move from analog commercial sex to digital pornography, particularly with the prevalence of these camming websites. Some folks have tried to sell this content directly through commercial sex advertising, but most appear to be migrating towards platforms like OnlyFans, with this self-identified male escort in Manhattan indicating that everyone's camming now. The main leader in the United States for digital pornography is a site called Pornhub. It did indicate that there was a slight uptick in traffic in March. However, the product category as a whole, that is to say the CAM websites as a whole going into the summer, are down 5.8%. The only site that appears to be having a significant increase in traffic is OnlyFans itself. All the other CAM websites have been suffering since the beginning of the pandemic. However, the traffic that is going to OnlyFans does not appear to be demand oriented, and the transition that folks are having going from analog commercial sex and advertising websites to these platforms like OnlyFans does not appear to be going great. The first obstacle is the transition cost. A dimly lit cell phone photo in a commercial sex advertisement is a expectation for the consumer. That's something you can get away with on adult search. However, the expectation for production value on OnlyFans is quite a bit higher. You need to have a good camera, you need to have good sound, you need to have good lighting. All these things are difficult to acquire because the supplies for all of these are short, and the technical expertise required to operate them is also a significant obstacle. They're also indicating that they're having difficulty choosing which platform and how to get set up and get regular income from these websites. They're also indicating that childcare is a significant obstacle. This self-identified performer on OnlyFans indicates, with my kids now at home around the clock, I don't have the privacy or the time to create an entire video. And folks that were doing analog commercial sex before digital pornography are indicating that the conversion is very low. The amount of money that they're making on OnlyFans is significantly lower than what they were making with analog commercial sex. Most of this is because there's increased competition between March 6th and March 17th. A spokesperson for OnlyFans indicated that there was a 75% increase in people signing up to be an OnlyFans quote-unquote creator. The self-identified sex worker indicates that the audience is increasing, but at the same time, more models are making online accounts. Once the strip clubs shut down, more women will be working online. Another performer on OnlyFans indicated, I've had to discount lower for everything to get the same audience, as a lot of new sex workers are joining the platform to try to make some money. This OnlyFans performer indicates that the market has been saturated for some time, and this is only becoming more true as sex workers who do in-person work, strippers, escorts, and dominatrices are trying to convert their businesses online. This additional OnlyFans performer indicates that there are more people trying to sell content than there are buyers, going so far as to say the market is completely oversaturated, and most of this new traffic that's coming into OnlyFans appears to be on the supply side as opposed to the demand side. More people are selling than people are buying. As a consequence, a lot of these folks that have made this transition are indicating that they're working more hours but making less money. This has caused some folks who are still doing analog commercial sex work to raise their rates. However, the transaction volume continues to be low as we go into the summer, and this is causing a significant increase in the level of panic. There have been some attempts to innovate on the payment models in order to provide a stopgap of revenue with what buyers are referring to as virus retainers. That is to say, a provider of commercial sex offering a discount of their regular rate for future hangs as long as the down payment comes now. Most buyers aren't taking it. We're also seeing in advertising more plaintive pleas for help. This is a provider in Florida holding up her toddler and just asking for donations over Cash App. We're also seeing an increase in vulnerable advertising with a significantly higher number of late-stage pregnancy ads than we have ever seen before. We're also seeing indications in the media that there, as a result of the widespread unemployment, a increase in the number of folks that are electively going into commercial sex. This article describes a 23-year-old living in Oregon, laid off her job in politics a couple weeks ago. Around that time, she created online accounts on various platforms. She said she always wanted to get involved in sex work, and this seemed like the perfect opportunity. All of this does represent a significant infection threat. This was already demonstrated in the spring in Japan, where their red light district had a disproportionately high positivity rate for coronavirus as opposed to the rest of the country. So what does this all mean for the supply side of the economy? I think we can say that the vulnerability for this population is at a lifetime high as a result of that significant drop of income. This population is always vulnerable, but now particularly when they're operating with an 8th or a 16th or indeed 0 income, we can expect that their vulnerability is going to be much higher. And this seems to be reflected in the experience of a lot of the service providers that we talk to around the country. The risk that they're willing to take in order to transact is increasing daily. And in the same way that the demand side of this economy is more risky for the folks that are choosing to transact, the folks that are choosing to transact on the supply side are seeing similarly high risks. And the switch to digital, the switch to OnlyFans, the attempt to use gaming as a stopgap measure for their income is trading analog dollars for digital pennies. They are working more and they are ultimately making less. So that wraps up our analysis for where we're at going into October. We're going to conclude here in a sec and get to your questions. Obviously, this is a significant macro econ event, the likes of which we have not seen since the Great Depression. The effects on the commercial sex economy do appear to be hyper-local and will be different from community to community in the United States. Demand is at a lifetime low. The vulnerability of providers of commercial sex is at a lifetime high. And when you think about what that impact is going to be for human trafficking and child trafficking for sex in the United States, I would like to refer you to a quotation that I heard from a prosecutor when I first started working in this field 4 years ago. She defines human trafficking as the commoditization of vulnerability. And if you feel that is true, if you feel that vulnerability is what leads to human trafficking in our lifetimes, this population has never been more vulnerable than right now. Absolutely delighted to be here. Here's my contact information. I'm going to leave that up on the screen here for a bit, and we will go ahead and open it up to y'all's questions for the next 15 minutes or so. That's all right.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, can hear you great.
Okay.
Christine.
I just want to make sure that people are aware. If you cannot find the Q&A box and you have a question and you are struggling with where that Q&A box is, rather than being frustrated, feel free to type it in the chat box. And I believe Rob can also see that. If not, I can see that and I will get the question to Rob. But the Q&A box is at the bottom of your screen. If you hover over the presentation, it looks like 2 little talk bubbles and then it says Q&A. Feel free to type those in there. Look at that, we got one.
Awesome. Has there been an abundance of underground strip clubs opening? Basically new ways of making money. There have been reports of pop-up parties where commercial sex can be purchased in the New York area in particular, but these appear to be few and far between. The organizers of those parties almost universally indicate after holding one that they are not going to be holding another one for the duration of the pandemic. My sense is that the demand for these kind of pop-up events is very low. And it's ultimately not profitable for them to operate. I'm not sure for non-penetrative sex commercial activity whether or not that's also occurring. I can't imagine that is necessarily true. But I will say in these online marketplaces, the discussion of strip clubs specifically is not very high. And a lot of these buyers prefer purchasing commercial sex to patronizing a strip club. So it could be happening and we're not seeing it because we're focused on a different side of the economy. Madeline asks, what observations have you made from your research specific to youth in CSEC and CSAM? You know, it's difficult to know how big the effect is, but I think we're starting to see some initial signals coming out of the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children and other governmental or NGO sources that the exploitation is increasing. One thing that we can safely assume is that exploitation is a function of the amount of time that the exploited spends with the exploiter. And so you can imagine this summer, during a period where the exploited were, staying at home and sheltering in place with their exploiter, that naturally more exploitation is starting to occur. Now, there is a countervailing force to this, and that is to say the increased enforcement that's going on the local level around CSAM around the country. If you take a look, if you look for CSAM or you look for child pornography indictments in the news, you're going to see a increase in the number of those prosecutions, and I imagine that is having a chilling effect on the marketplaces where this kind of stuff is exchanged. So there's no quantitative piece of data that we can point to that says an X% increase. However, I think it is safe to assume at this point that there is more exploitation occurring as the exploited are stuck at home with their exploiters. Great question. Deputy Commissioner Alador asks, can you talk a little bit about how hard it is to find and track predators who are specifically target children online? Depressingly, it's very easy. These folks operate with a sense of impunity. And if you want to see this kind of activity for yourself, it's all you have to do is go to a community where a individual user has unfettered, unmoderated, unmetered access to a large population of kids. And this can happen in social media platforms that we're all familiar with, like Instagram or Snapchat. But if you take a look at some of the cases that are coming up around the country, we're also seeing a increase in recruiting and grooming in video games and apps. So games like Minecraft, Apex Legends, League of Legends, seemingly all these games have the word legend in the title. Fortnite, a lot of these games where you have the capability of browsing a list of users and accessing a large number of users quickly. That's where we're seeing this activity take place. In particular, we are seeing recruiting and grooming starting to orient itself going into the fall in games that are called free-to-play or games that have some sort of virtual currency that the groomer can dangle as a carrot to the person that they're ultimately trying to exploit. Lynn asks, do you have an indication about indicators of increased risk of sexual coercion or violence for people living with buyers, such as family members, wives, children, and teens? We're not seeing any cases that the buyers are turning to family members in order to satiate their sexual drive. There is some evidence coming out of Seattle that the rate of pedophilia among sex buyers is relatively low. The King County prosecutor does a for every buyer that they find with an underage victim, as a part of their court-ordered restitution, they have to undergo a clinical psych panel. It's administered by a board-certified clinician, and they are looking specifically for the mental illness that may be driving the sex buying behavior. And they have a few hundred buyers through this program today, and the number of folks that are psychoreactive for pedophilia is only around 5%, which I think is reflective of what we're seeing in our kind of activity. There are very few, or what we're seeing in our counter demand platform. There are not a lot of buyers that specifically look for kids. However, almost all the buyers will actively avoid any sort of knowledge that the provider of commercial sex might be underage, because in almost every jurisdiction in the country, the mens rea for those aggravated charges of purchasing a child for sex are predicated on a knowing standard. So if the buyer doesn't know, the buyer frequently is not liable. And as a consequence, they tend to avoid that altogether in their conversations. Great question. From Lynn, do you have an idea about indicator? Oh, sorry, I already got that one. Jennifer, how does ChildSafe AI work with authorities to help the victims? We don't have any victim-oriented services today. Our law enforcement tools are primarily around disrupting the economics of human trafficking. And that's why we have what I feel is is a useful perspective because our work and our software is really oriented around the buyers and their behavior and what they are engaging in an effort to assist law enforcement to significantly disrupt the demand in their area and reduce the total amount of wealth that's flowing into their human trafficking economy. Deputy Commissioner Alador asks again, the free-to-play or in-game currency issue is really important information that we can use in our prevention efforts. You know, when I talk to schools or when I talk to young people about this particular problem domain, you know, there are three things that I try to reinforce with respect to their digital safety. The first one is that it is profoundly unfair that the responsibility for being safe online is being pushed to them. The expectation that a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old has to be a digital citizen, that this is something that they need to be educated on, is candidly a failure that we share as a society. Like, we don't have the expectation that a kid can put on an adult safety belt in a car and be safe, right? For some reason, the internet appears to be this special technology that doesn't have the kind of safety features that we expect from all the other technology that a child is going to use, and that's something that we really need to change. And so, confiding with the child that the situation that they're in is unfair, I think is a really important thing to express. The second thing that you need to express is that the person that they're talking to on Snapchat, the person that they're talking to on Fortnite, the person that's trying to get them to have a compromising photo or trying to you know, trade you know, some kind of internet contact for this a virtual currency. We see this in case after case after case after case. That predator is talking to dozens, maybe hundreds of kids at a time. The child is not the only person that the predator is talking to. They are talking to a ton of kids over and over again. And in the same way that you see a transformation of characters in like popular stockbroker movies like The Boiler Room or The Wolf of Wall Street, where they start off and they're not very good at selling stocks, but they call people and call people and call people, and they get better and better and better as time goes on. That kind of activity is what we're seeing with predators online, because all these platforms give you completely unmetered access to as many people as you want to talk to as possible. They play it like a contact sport. They just try kid after kid after kid, and they get better at tugging on these threads of vulnerability over time. I think a child that is forearmed with the sense that the person that they're talking to is running this kind of like telemarketer call game or con game is an important one to share. The last one that I share is really with the child and their parents. And, you know, we have seen cases coming from every socioeconomic class, every ethnicity, every nationality. You know, we've seen prom queens and kings who, you know, whose parents are in law enforcement, get wrapped up in this stuff. And ultimately, the one shared characteristic of all these cases is that the child does not feel that they have unconditional love at home. The child does not feel that there's nothing that the child can do that will make their parents not love them anymore. Sadly, in a lot of these cases, that unconditional love does exist, but it's not perceived by the child. And these kinds of conversations are really important to have. I think the most powerful inoculation that a parent can have for a kid online right now is persistently and consistently telling the child that there is nothing the child can do that will make them not love them anymore. And that's really how you, that's unfortunately the only real inoculant that a parent has for a child online. Stephen Phillips, scary thing is how teens think they know everything. I was never like that, LOL, and think their parents are overreacting. Stephen, I was totally that kid, and I was totally wrong. Christy asks, are there any articles that you can recommend for more information regarding this matter? I think the best one, Christy, was one that Deputy Commissioner Alador mentioned. There's a 9-part feature series that was published in the New York Times by Gabriel Dance that is spectacular. I think it's the most significant piece of journalism that has been produced around this problem domain. If you're wanting to understand what the current state of CSEC is in the United States and how we got here and how little is being done about it, I think that series is one you can take a look at. The first article, which we posted in the chat. Chrissy also asked, now that OnlyFans is increasing, is there a way for government task forces that are monitoring usage and human trafficking increase or in general? They are actively taking a look at OnlyFans, and they're actively getting cases today that are coming from OnlyFans. Traffickers putting children on OnlyFans. So it's something that they are seeing frequently. What have you found with sex work industries and contact tracing for the virus? Contact tracing for the virus is really only happening in the United States, in New York. And there has not been a significant outbreak that has been tied to commercial sex. But I also think that's because New York has had particularly depressed demand for commercial sex relative to the rest of the country. I think because the outbreak was so severe in March and April, the buyers here are still scared off. So we haven't seen a significant outbreak that can be contact traced yet. Does that mean that's not happening? I find that very hard to believe, especially in the Midwest and in states like Michigan and Wisconsin. I suspect there are probably outbreaks that are connected to this. However, none of those states are doing adequate contact tracing, so I'm not sure that we're ever going to know whether or not that's true. Is there a recommended video or document parents can watch and review with their children to help them understand? I don't have a recommendation that I can suggest for that. I think when you all are thinking as a community how best you can serve in a preventative context for this, the amount of literature that's available for this that is not hyperbolic, that is not extreme, but meeting the children where they are and talking about the risk in a sober but non-threatening way is really lacking right now. And as you all are thinking about programs going into the next year of how you can best protect our kids, especially given the explosion of digitization that we are likely going to continue to experience as we go through this, I think that does represent a significant opportunity for you all as professionals. Madeline shared some resources that are available on the OCFS site. Okay, looks like we answered them all. Christine, was that useful for y'all?
I think that was absolutely very useful. I don't know how it could not be. I know it brought to light a lot of things for me that I think some of us haven't thought about. Specifically the in-game currency, free to play. That's not something I would ever have thought of on my own. It's, completely foreign to me as both a parent and a practitioner. So it gives us another lens to look at our work. So yeah, at this point, everything we learn, I think there's still some, so I'm always relevant, how many of these teens, and I know you said that there's the buyers specifically don't ask the age of the person because of that, legal loophole, so to speak. I can't even imagine how many of these young men and women are actually minors and doing this to make money or to feed their brothers and sisters and help their guardian out in a tough time because their parent or grandparent or whoever they live with has lost their job due to COVID. So this is a quick and easy way for them to make money. So I'd be curious to see what those figures and statistics are. And I know there's, with the fact that they don't disclose and people don't ask, that there might not ever really be a way to get an accurate analysis of that data.
Yeah, you're touching on, one of the biggest problems that we have as professionals working in this field, Christine, and that there's a lot of basic fundamental research that has not yet been done. Just the question, how many child sex trafficking victims are there in the United States today, remains an unanswered question. That is something that we do not know. The thing I will share, speaking to the buyers and the proportion of people who are concerned about the provider's age. A statistic I always give is whenever we do a national operation, we go through the conversations that we have with buyers and we try to see how many people asked for their age. The last national operation we did was in January, just before the Super Bowl. We identified 1,800 buyers of commercial sex through that operation in a number of jurisdictions across the country.
Wow.
Guess how many of them asked for the provider's age?
I would say 0.
Wasn't quite that pessimistic, but it was 4. Not 4%, it was 4 people. 4 people.
That's crazy.
Out of 1,800. To give you a sense of the kind of pervasiveness of that kind of victimization that is occurring. We always say at Child Safe, human trafficking is not a sex crime, it's an economic crime of opportunity, and it starts with the buyer. We had one last question from Deputy Commissioner Alador asking if we have time, what would you want to see game companies do to address these issues? I think this is a problem that the entire tech community has to attack head on. Obviously, something has got to change from a regulatory standpoint surrounding the liability that these companies have. I will share that there is federal legislation that is currently being considered that came out of committee and Senate. It's called Earn It. And if you'd like to learn more, you can Google it, or I can share it in the chat. I think the window for passing anything has passed in this legislative session, but as you're thinking about your advocacy work, not just on a local level, but indeed at a federal policy level, I would encourage you to take a look at that legislation. It introduces criminal and civil liability to tech companies for allowing CCM distribution on their sites for the first time. And I don't think it's the end all be all. I think it's a single step towards introducing responsibility to these companies. It's Earn It, E-A-R-I-T, and I will include a link for the rest of the group. But as you're thinking about what you can do, simply calling your electeds, and a similar bill was introduced in the House 2 weeks ago, calling your electeds and indicating that you support this necessary step to hold technology providers to account for the exploitation of children, I think is a great way for you to contribute to moving not just game companies, but all companies to a better posture with respect to this problem domain.
If I could just jump in for 1 second. Thank you, Rob, for that presentation. And one of the things that I really want to lift up from what you shared is the conversation about vulnerability being at an all-time high, and that we know a lot of families are really struggling financially right now. So for all of us who are providers, and for folks who are in a position to think about their safe harbor funds and how those can be used locally, what opportunities do you have, and what opportunities can you create to make sure you're getting those immediate and basic needs of young people met, and providing positive youth development opportunities? Is it incentivizing participation in virtual, sessions, or how can we make sure that we are providing that prevention in all the different ways that are possible? So we will come back to this on Friday morning at the end of that session, but I want you to start thinking about that. All the things that we hear throughout the week, how can we use the resources we have locally to counteract some of what we're hearing? And I also do want to lift up that we are approaching this from a positive youth development standpoint as we approach everything. So please, don't necessarily take this information and go find your teenagers and throw their phones in the garbage, right? That's not going to work. But do use it as an opportunity to guide your conversations with young people, that this is really difficult work. It's perhaps intimidating to talk about for the first time, but it needs to be a live and ongoing conversation, and it can be a difficult one. And we are here to help, talk with you about that this week and ongoing. So please don't be shy in using your resources, including us.
Awesome. Well, Christine and Madeline, thank you so much for having me today. It was a really inspiring start to the week. And I look forward to seeing the outcomes of this spectacular week of all these dedicated professionals here in New York. you know, it's a very difficult time for all of us. I think it's particularly a difficult time for the children that we serve. And seeing this many professionals here in my home state, New York, spending their time sharing ideas on how we can better serve this vulnerable population is deeply inspiring, and I really appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate you being here and giving your time to speak to us. We are very grateful. We are all going to take this and use it to guide our work moving forward. The bio for Rob and all the great things about him are in the chat. We will pass along some materials at the end of Summit to get everyone information if you need it, more information. And as Madeline said, we will reconvene and talk about everything on Friday. I want to thank everyone for being here this morning, and just for all the work you do every day. Please keep in mind that if any of this information was triggering for you or felt a lot, to take some time today for some self-care, whether you go for a walk, hopefully it's beautiful where you are, or just take some deep breaths, put on the Calm app, whatever works for you. That's what's most important. We can't pour from an empty cup, so take care of yourselves. And I look forward to seeing all of you this afternoon. Thanks so much, Rob.
All right, take care, y'all.
Bye, everyone.